We now come to the statement on Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories. I call Minister Falconer for the statement. Minister. Minister.
With permission, Mr. Speaker, I'll make a statement on Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories. The two-state solution is in peril. Catastrophic conflict in Gaza and a shocking deterioration in the West Bank. This is an affront to the rights of Palestinians, but it is also against the interests of Israelis, against their long-term security and their democracy. Today, I will update the House on new actions we are taking to uphold human rights and defend the vision and viability of two states living side by side in peace. Mr. Speaker, 2024 saw the worst settler violence against Palestinians in the West Bank in the last 2 decades. 2025 is on track to be just as violent. Between 1996 and 2023, an average of 7 illegal settler outposts were established annually. In 2024, settlers erected 59. These outposts are illegal under both Israeli and international law. 2 weeks ago, the Israeli government itself announced 22 new settlements in the West Bank. Every outpost, every building the settlers erect is a flagrant breach of international law. It disregards the views of international partners for Israel, and there are now in excess of 500,000 settlers living in the West Bank. There are over 100,000 in East Jerusalem, the territory that must form the heart of a sovereign, viable, and free Palestine. Mr. Speaker, the sharp growth in settlements alone is dangerous enough, but it has been accompanied by a steep rise in settler violence and extremist rhetoric. Itamar Ben-Gvir has led 7 provocative intrusions into Haram al-Sharif since 2022. In 2023, settlers rampaged through the village of Huwara, in what Israel's own West Bank military commander described as a pogrom done by outlaws. Last month, the villagers of Mugayir Adir fled their homes in fear after the construction of an illegal outpost 100 metres away. This month, settlers attacked the town of Deir Dawan. They set fire to houses and injured residents. This violence and rhetoric is deeply concerning, an assault not just on Palestinian communities, but on the very fundamentals of a two-state solution. This is an attempt to entrench a one-state reality where there are no equal rights. The two-state solution remains the only viable framework for a just and lasting peace. I know it is supported on every side of this House. Israelis living in secure borders, recognised and at peace with their neighbours, free from the threat of terrorism, with Palestinians living in their own state, with dignity and security, free of occupation. Mr. Speaker, we are steadfastly committed to defending that vision, not just with words, but with action. That is why we pledged £101 million in additional support to the Palestinian people this year, why we are working to strengthen and reform the Palestinian Authority, why my right honourable friend, the Foreign Secretary, signed a landmark agreement with Prime Minister Mustafa, why my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, welcomed him to Downing Street, why we are clear that Hamas must release the hostages immediately and unconditionally, and that Hamas can have no role in Palestinian governance. It is why we are committed to working with civil society, Israelis and Palestinians, to support those who believe in peace and coexistence. However, Mr. Speaker, the gravity of the situation demands further action. The reality is that these human rights abuses, incitement to violence, extremist rhetoric, comes not just from an uncontrolled fringe, but from individuals who are ministers in this Israeli government. We must hold them to account and protect the viability of the two-state solution. So today we are sanctioning Bezalel Smotrich and Itamar Ben-Gvir. We are acting alongside Australia, Canada, New Zealand and Norway, who have also announced their own measures today. These two men are responsible for inciting settler violence against Palestinian communities in the West Bank, violence which has led to the deaths of Palestinian civilians and the displacement of whole towns and villages. This violence constitutes an abuse of Palestinians' human rights. It is cruel, it is degrading, and it is completely unacceptable. We have told the Israeli government repeatedly that we would take tougher action if this did not stop. It still did not. The appalling rhetoric has continued unchecked. Violent perpetrators continue to act with impunity and with encouragement. So let me tell the House now, when we say something, we mean it. Today we have shown with our partners, two extremists, that we will not sit by while they wreck the prospects of future peace. Mr. Speaker, our actions today do not diminish our support for the security of Israel and the Israeli people. The agendas of these two men are not even supported by the majority of Israelis. Amen. Israelis recognise that these individuals are not working in their interest. As the Foreign Secretary said to this House last month, we want a strong friendship with Israel based on shared values and our many close ties. Our condemnation of Hamas, a proscribed organisation, and the appalling attacks of October the 7th is unequivocal. Our commitment to the security of Israelis and the future of Israel is unwavering. We will continue to press for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the release of the hostages still held so cruelly by Hamas, a ramping up of aid to those Gazans in desperate need. The repeated threats by Hamas to the lives of the hostages are grotesque, and it prolongs the agony of their family and the loved ones. Hamas should release all the hostages immediately and unconditionally. Amen. Mr. Speaker, the situation in the West Bank cannot be seen in isolation from events in Gaza. Extremist rhetoric advocating forced displacement of Palestinians, denial of essential aid, the creation of new Israeli settlements in the Strip is equally appalling and dangerous. This government will never accept the unlawful transfer of Gazans from or within Gaza, nor any reduction in the territory of the Gaza Strip. The humanitarian situation remains catastrophic in Gaza. While Israel's ground and air operations expand, Gazans have now been pushed into less than 20% of the territory. Hospitals have been destroyed and damaged. The entire population of Gaza is now at risk of famine. Meanwhile, Israel's newly introduced measures for aid endanger civilians and foster desperation. They are inhumane. The Red Cross Field Hospital in Rafah reported last week that it has responded to an unprecedented 5 mass casualty incidents in the 2 weeks prior. In each case, Palestinians have been killed or injured trying to access aid in Gaza. Desperate civilians who have endured 20 months of war should never face the risk of death or injury simply to feed themselves and their families. We need further action from the Israeli government now to lift all restrictions on aid, to enable the UN and aid partners to do their work, to ensure food and other critical supplies can reach people safely wherever they are. We will continue to support the UN and other trusted NGOs as the most effective and principled partners for aid delivery. Our support has meant over 465,000 people have received essential healthcare. 640,000 have received food, and 275,000 have improved access to water, sanitation and hygiene services. We of course support the efforts led by the United States, by Qatar and Egypt to secure an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. We welcome France and Saudi Arabia's initiative to chair an international conference next week to advance a two-state solution. Mr. Speaker, it is a two-state solution that is the only way to bring the long-lasting peace that both Israelis and Palestinians deserve. But it cannot remain an empty slogan repeated by generations of diplomats and politicians, but increasingly divorced from the reality on the ground. Mr. Smotrich said, "There is no such thing as a Palestinian nation." Mr. Ben-Gvir has spoken of his rights in the West Bank, a territory his government is occupying, as being more important than the rights of millions of Palestinians. Their own words condemn them, Mr. Speaker. To defend those Palestinians' rights, to protect the two-state solution, to see Israelis and Palestinians living side by side in safety and security, this government is taking action. I commend the statement to the House.
Service Secretary State, Dame Priti Patel.
Mr. Speaker, and I'm grateful to the Minister for his statement and for the advanced sight of it. The situation, as he has said, in the Middle East and the suffering we are seeing is serious and completely intolerable. And I would reiterate my remarks in response to the statement last week on the levels of desperation and suffering being completely unacceptable. We continue to see violence, deaths and casualties, and as the Minister has said, near aid distribution centres, which is simply incomprehensible, and that should simply never happen. Britain has continued to leverage its influence at every opportunity with Israel and with our international allies to change the course of events that the world is witnessing, to ensure that the remaining hostages are released, that aid reaches those who need it, and that a sustainable to the end of this conflict is achieved. We all want to see a better future for the Israeli and Palestinian people, and the UK must continue to play a leading role in achieving this. To do this, the UK needs to have a constructive set of channels of communication open with all our partners in the region and working towards peace and ending this conflict, including dialogue with Israel. The Minister will be aware that the sanctioning of individuals is always under review. That is the right policy. And in the case of Israel, this has been previously considered even by Lord Cameron, who's spoken of that in the last government. So would the Minister just explain the timings of this decision being taken today? And can he give an assessment on what their impact will be? He's mentioned already, and I've read the Foreign Office statement on asset freezes, travel bans, director disqualifications. They'll only have an effect in the right way by working with allies in particular, and the statement also refers to action being taken with Australia, Canada, New Zealand and Norway. Can the Minister tell us what discussions he's had on this issue with other partners, including the United States of America, and their response? And with this decision and others taken, can the Minister give his honest assessment of the UK's government's relationship with Israel? Can he let us know what direct communication he and the Foreign Secretary have had with Israel on securing the delivery of vital, life-saving humanitarian aid to people in desperate need of help? On this side of the House, as he heard last week, we've been clear that settlement violence is not helpful at all. It's going backwards when it comes to delivering the two-state solution. And we again would urge Israel, for its part, not to take steps that could make the two-state solution even more difficult. We have consistently been committed to supporting a two-state solution, delivered in the right way, and at the right time, and will work constructively to support every effort to achieve this. Mr. Speaker, while discussing the West Bank, can the Minister provide an update on the progress being made with the reforms, as he's touched on already, with the Palestinian Authority, following the MOU that was signed in April? The House will understand that credible governance is needed for long-term stability in the West Bank and in Gaza too, and of course that means with no future role for Hamas. And more widely on the conflict, the reports of the latest rounds of negotiation on hostage releases and bringing an end to the conflict are frustrating for us all and have not made the progress that we all desperately want to see. So can the Minister provide an update on the direct discussions he is involved in, including with Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Egypt, Qatar and other allies in the region? The remaining hostages, as he has said, held in captivity of the Iranian-backed terrorists, they have faced over 600 days of suffering in horrific conditions, and securing their release continues to be critical to seeking to end this conflict. We all, Mr. Speaker, want to see aid get into Gaza, to the innocent Palestinians, the Palestinians that are suffering, the need for vital food, medicines and shelter. We have discussed this in previous statements, and I completely recognise and understand the difficulties associated in light of the challenging situation in getting aid in. So can the Minister provide an update on the amount of aid, the types of aid the UK continues to support and fund directly through partners, where that aid is currently located, and the efforts to get this aid in? The House will know, I said this last week in the statement as well, in response to the statement, my noble friend Lord Cameron, previously working with the Israeli government, secured aid by working with allies and the Israeli government, including the opening up of crossings and ports, increasing the number of trucks and volumes of aid entering Gaza. Can the Minister confirm that he has spoken to or presented a clear plan to Israel, working with our partners on supporting more aid going in, increases of volume of aid, making use of our long-standing experience, because obviously Britain leads the world when it comes to getting aid and that expertise with a strong track record? And finally, can the Minister give any update on the actions being taken to restart the dialogue and discussions on the viability of the Abraham Accords, and on making progress when it comes to delivering the Cairo plan, which the House knows is so important? It is backed by local and regional allies and sees a really pivotal role when it comes to the Egyptian government playing that vital role for securing peace in the region, because these are essential conditions that we need for creating peace and stability and a better future for Israel and Palestine.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Right Honourable Lady for her questions. She raises important points about work with allies, and let me address the point on Egypt, which is vital. The Egyptians have conducted important work, and I will be pleased to be with them next week as part of the two-state solution conference to discuss the reconstruction of Gaza. The Right Honourable Lady is absolutely right that we need to be focused on how we can work with partners in the region and beyond to try and ensure that the vital building blocks can be put in place, both for a reformed Palestinian Authority but also a rebuilt Gaza. We can all see how acute those needs are. We have sought to work with partners, and I'm very grateful to the Speaker and to colleagues for their flexibility this evening for doing a statement in a slightly unusual way. We have sought to coordinate closely with the partners who are part of this statement. We are coordinating with others. We have had direct discussions with a range of other partners, including the United States, about some of these questions. We have spoken to the Israeli government directly today. The Right Honourable Lady invites me to comment on the state of the relationship between the UK and Israel. The state of disagreement, I think, is clear. I regret the tone of some of our exchanges most recently. We do not wish to have such a profound disagreement with the Israeli government, but as the Minister for the Middle East, when we do disagree as profoundly as we do, then I'm afraid I have to say so both publicly and privately, and that is what I have done.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've long called for comprehensive sanctions on Israel in response to its crimes against the Palestinian people, so the sanctions against two far-right ministers are a step in the right direction. But Israel's war crimes are about far more than a couple of bad apples. So much, much more needs to be done. When Russia invaded Ukraine, over 2,500 sanctions were rightfully imposed on Russia. So I say to the Foreign Minister, isn't it now time for Russia-style sanctions on Israel to help stop the genocide?
Mr. Speaker, I want to be really clear that the two men where we have announced sanctions today do not represent the majority of Israelis. There are so many connections between the UK and Israel, and we hear about the extent to which the decisions, the rhetoric, and the language of these two ministers causes concern in Israel as well. So we are taking action on extremist rhetoric and extremist action which threatens the human rights of Palestinians, and that continues to be the threshold for these sanctions that we'll keep under review.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Column Nunn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I also thank the Minister for advance sight of his statement. I want to begin by welcoming the step taken by the government today to sanction the extremist ministers Ben Gvir and Smotrich. It is only right that they face consequences for their relentless calls for the forced dispossession of Palestinians, which have so egregiously undermined prospects for securing a just and sustainable peace in the region. My party leader was the first to call for these sanctions last February, when their extremist views were already clear. My only disappointment, therefore, is that the Conservatives refused to act when they had the chance to do so, and it has taken this government nearly a year to take this important step. It's now essential that the government sustain steps towards a just resolution of the conflict, which must include getting the aid in, getting the hostages out, and agreeing an enduring ceasefire. In the last week, we have seen the product of the extremism advanced by Ben Gvir and Smotrich, the deaths of more Palestinians who were queuing in desperation for food from the so-called Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. Calls for Palestinian displacement can no longer be tolerated. So will the government build on today's progress by urgently considering sanctions on other extremist ministers who continue to call for the blockade of Gaza and expanded military action in the Strip, starting with Israel Katz? The time has also come to listen to members on all sides of this House and officially to recognise the independent state of Palestine. Will the government commit to taking this vital step at next week's summit in New York? Recognition will demonstrate the UK's commitment to self-determination, but also make clear that building on today's announcement, the UK will do all it can to wrest control away from the extremes and give both Israelis and Palestinians hope of a lasting peace.
I thank the honourable gentleman for his questions. The two-state solution conference next week is an important moment. We're discussing with our friends and allies our approach to that conference, and no doubt I will return to this House with your permission, Mr. Speaker, next week to discuss further. I won't speculate on further sanctions from the dispatch box. We have taken these steps because of the extremist rhetoric, because of the damage that these two men have done to Palestinian human rights, and we will keep further sanctions to that effect under review.
John Pearce.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I very much welcome the statement from the Minister. It is absolutely right to target the enemies of peace within the Netanyahu government, who are entirely separate from and different from the will of the Israeli people. I very much welcome the Minister's reference to supporting civilised societies within Israel and Palestine. And it is true that there can be no two-state solution, a top-down two-state solution, without building those communities. So will the Minister update the House on UK's proposals for an international fund for Israeli and Palestinian peace?
I thank my honourable friend and colleague from the East Midlands. He's long been committed to these issues, in particular the difficult work, but vital work, of ensuring that civil society in both Israel and Palestine work on peace-building projects. I know he was in the region recently, and I commend him for his approach. We hope to set out our approach to the International Fund following the announcements of the Prime Minister in due course. We want to make as full a contribution as we can to bringing peacemakers on both sides of this conflict together.
Sir Roger.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As you know, I have tried for 2 days to raise this through a new urgent question. And when the Minister came to the dispatch box, I had expected to hear something constructive. What we've actually heard is the sanctioning of 2 people. The United Kingdom government could unilaterally recognise Palestine. The United Kingdom government could show the world a lead. And above all, the government could, as an absolute priority, negotiate the delivery of food and water and medicine to women and children who in Palestine are starving, through the route from Larnaca direct into Gaza. I asked him last week, I'll ask him again, when is the government going to do something?
I thank the honourable gentleman for his question. We have to, Mr. Speaker, in this House be focused on what are the real options for getting aid at volume into Gaza. The truth is they must be via land routes, and even when aid is in Gaza by land, it is still incredibly dangerous for aid workers. Ultimately, deconfliction mechanisms for aid workers in Gaza, should a full aid operation be allowed back in the Strip, will be vital. I met this week with the bereaved families of the victims of the World Central Kitchen operation. There are 3 British veterans, there are 3 British families still mourning the loss of their loved ones at the hands of the IDF when they were trying to deliver aid to the people of Gaza. If there was some other option to get aid into Gaza safely, we would take it. No such option exists. We have to negotiate access with the Israeli government, and that is what we seek to do.
Abid.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I welcome the sanctions announced today, which are long overdue but signify an important step forward, and I thank the Minister for his hard work and his strong statement on this issue. The Honourable Member for Earley and Woodley and I were denied entry by Israel into the occupied Palestinian territories precisely because we spoke out against war crimes in Gaza and against annexation in the West Bank. Annexation is real, it is happening. Partners in the region are calling for recognition before it's too late. Today, the US Ambassador to Israel reiterated what many fear, that the US will not prioritise a Palestinian state becoming a reality in our lifetimes. Does the Minister agree with me that we must not throw recognition into the long grass, that failure to recognise next week at the UN conference implies that Israel does have a veto and that the Israeli government will continue to annex and terrorise Palestinians in the West Bank? If we do not recognise now, there will be no Palestinian state to recognise. So I ask the Minister, does he agree with me that we must recognise a Palestinian state at the UN conference next week?
I thank my honourable friend for the question, for her commitment to these issues. Clearly, recognition is right at the centre of any discussion of a two-state solution. The actions we have announced today are part of the UK's efforts to ensure that the reality of a two-state solution remains in play. It is clear from the rhetoric of the 2 ministers that we have sanctioned, as well as others in the Israeli government, that there is limited commitment on the side of the Israeli government to advancing that cause. The UK is committed to advancing that cause, and we will talk to our friends and allies in the run-up to the conference next week about it.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have absolutely no sympathy with the comments and the rhetoric of the 2 Israeli ministers the Minister has announced sanctions on. In his statement, the Minister said very clearly, and I quote, "We will not sit by while extremists wreck the prospects of future peace." So if the action he has just announced is not to be seen as a double standard, where are the sanctions against ministers within the Palestinian Authority who have incited violence and made vile comments of hatred against Jews and Israelis?
Mr. Speaker, as I am afraid I say with regularity, I won't speculate on further sanctions on either side of the conflict from the dispatch box. But the honourable gentleman is right. The thresholds and the tests are the same. We condemn anti-Semitic rhetoric, we condemn incitement to violence, and we'll keep all sanctions under review.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The sanctions imposed on the two Israeli ministers was long overdue, but it is a welcome first step. But I want to ask the Minister, as I continue to ask him and the Foreign Secretary, why are we still arming Israel? And when will we impose an arms embargo? When will we ban goods from settlements? And finally, he's already alluded to this, but the conference on the two-state solution in New York next week is a crucial moment in recognition of a Palestinian state. The Minister has the opportunity at this dispatch box, actually, to share with us across this House that the UK government is committed to recognising Palestinian statehood. Will he?
Mr. Speaker, I feel I need to take issue with the idea that this is the first step that this government has taken in relation to these issues. I've been at this. It's not in relation to sanctions either. This is the third set of sanctions we've announced in relation to settlements in the West Bank. In relation to the two-state solution conference next week, we are talking with our friends and allies, and I'm sure, with your permission, Mr. Speaker, I'll be back in this House next week to talk about it.
Monica Harding.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The President of the ICRC has said in Gaza humanity is failing, and what is happening in Gaza is surpassing any acceptable legal, moral and humane standard. Palestinians are being stripped of their dignity. When will he pronounce that they have a state? And given that Israel continues to blockade in, what more will he do? He talks about first steps. He needs to run.
Mr. Speaker, it wasn't me who talked about first steps. We have taken a sequence of measures and we will continue to take measures. The blockade on aid into Gaza is reprehensible. I have talked about the famine that faces the whole of the Strip. The steps we have taken today will not unlock aid into Gaza. We will continue to advocate, press and take further measures until aid is unlocked into Gaza.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I stand with my honourable friend, the member for Sheffield Central. She and I were denied entry to Israel only 2 months ago. Among the reasons given was our advocacy for the sanctions that the government has placed today. And I stand by my comments and I stand by the government's decisive action today. It's important, as the Minister mentions, that this action has been taken to uphold the rights of Palestinians, and the UK, along with its international allies, can take further action by recognising the state of Palestine. I ask the Minister what more he can do and what more all of us in this House can do to press our international allies together to come to that collective decision.
Mr. Speaker, I'm grateful for my honourable friend's contribution. She went to the region to see with her own eyes, as she did repeatedly as a much respected journalist and author before she came to this House. I know her commitment to these issues, and I can assure her we are talking with the full range of our friends and allies about the approach to the two-state solution conference next week.
Pritchard.
I welcome the Minister's statement, but could he tell the House whether he thinks these sanctions will save a single Palestinian life? And if he'll forgive me, ahead of the Palestinian Recognition Summit, rather than Two-State Solution Summit, maybe that was a slip of the tongue there by the Minister, next week in New York, some observers looking at the statement today might be suspicious that there is a sort of cynical coincidence of the timing of this statement ahead of that summit next week. So can he reassure the House and all of those that are very concerned about this issue that the United Kingdom government has not done some grubby deal behind the scenes with the American administration, trading this particular set of sanctions today and saying no to recognition in New York next week?
Mr. Speaker, I called the conference next week what it's called by the French and Saudi Arabian authorities who have called it. I can confirm to the honourable gentleman that I have done no deals, grubby or otherwise. We take sovereign steps on this. And Mr. Speaker, I'm asked by the honourable gentleman about timing. As I know many members will appreciate, working in concert with our allies, making a joint announcement of this kind requires some coordination. I was here last Wednesday, and I was being asked, understandably, by many members when I would be in a position to announce further steps. I would like to have been in a position to announce further steps earlier than I have been, but we have always taken the view that it is most powerful to act with our allies. So we took the time in order to be able to work in concert with them.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Many of us have been consistent in our calls for sanctions against those that commit war crimes in Gaza. So the sanctions placed on these two far-right ministers today are a step in the right direction. But let us be clear, this is nowhere near enough. Palestinians starve and aid is blocked in flagrant violation of international law, whilst the UK continues to allow arms exports to Israel. We cannot condemn the humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza while continuing to arm those contributing to it. The government must act now and end all arms sales to Israel. Anything less is not just a failure of diplomacy, it's an absolute failure of moral leadership in the face of a genocide.
Mr. Speaker, let me be really clear for the House. We are not selling arms, not bombs, not bullets, for use by Israel in Gaza. We have a carve-out on the F-35 programme in order to maintain the programme which both us and so many of our allies benefit from. But where F-35 parts were directly being sold to Israel, that trade is suspended. We are not providing the weaponry that is being used in Gaza. And I want to reassure my honourable friends that I do not think, the government does not think, that the actions that we have taken today will be the golden answer to getting aid into Gaza. It will not be the golden answer for securing a ceasefire. We will continue to work on all of those fronts until we achieve progress.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And while we welcome the sanctioning of both Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, this really should have happened a long time ago, and it now needs to go much, much further. But further to the previous question, today's announcement highlights the absurdity of the government's position, because the Foreign Secretary recently described those views as being repellent and monstrous, and today's statement accepts that Israel is guilty of human rights abuses and is in flagrant breach of international law. So on what basis, legal or moral, can the government continue to supply F-35 components knowing that the end user will be a regime that they themselves have condemned for espousing repellent and monstrous views, and who they now accept are guilty of human rights violations and are in flagrant breach of international law?
Mr. Speaker, for the purposes of time, I won't address the legal questions, not least given they're being considered by a judicial review. We are confident that the limited carve-out that we have done in order to maintain the functioning of the F-35 programme, vital to our national security and that of so many of our allies, is both legal and proportionate and moral, and we will continue to fight that case in the court.
Sarah Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I welcome today's announcement. It's a huge and significant step which sends a clear message to the Israeli government. However, for millions of people in Palestine, in Gaza, they go to bed every night, if they can even find a bed to sleep on, unsure if they're going to wake up in the morning and whether their family members who might have survived so far will also wake up with them. So does the Minister agree with me that we must take the next vital step towards the two-state solution, which is for the UK to recognise the state of Palestine next week at the conference that France and Saudi Arabia are leading on?
Mr. Speaker, I won't repeat my answers about the conference next week, but I just want to... my honourable friend has been committed to these issues for a long time, and she is absolutely right when she says that millions of people are in an abject position, facing famine, terrible shortages of all essential supplies, and they weigh very much on the mind of this government each and every day.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The two Israeli ministers that the Minister has announced being sanctioned are no friends of the Israeli people or the Palestinians. And I have no truck with them, and nor should any of us. But the reality is, of course, that we have two aspects here. That is Hamas control still of Gaza and their refusal to release the hostages or to agree to a hostage exchange, or indeed to allow aid in and to allow that aid to reach the Palestinian people, as well as the challenge of releasing those hostages, as we all want to see happen. They've refused the ceasefire deal. So what action is the Minister going to take to make sure that Hamas come to the negotiating table and actually negotiate a ceasefire so that the international aid can get in? And whilst I'm on my feet, what is the attitude of the government towards those that attempt to break the blockade, such as the Madeleine ship?
Mr. Speaker, I have called on Hamas to return to ceasefire talks when reports reached us that they were not doing so. I hope that those ceasefire talks are successful, and I, of course, repeat my call for hostages to be released. We have been clear about the blockade of aid, but I must once again reiterate that it is the land routes that we must be completely focused on. It is the land routes from Egypt, from Jordan and from Israel itself which must be opened at the scale required to get the aid in the way required.
First of all, can I thank the Minister for his statement to the House, and can I thank the Government for their sanctions that they have placed. What I do want to understand, whilst I appreciate allies have to work together and it takes time to have these negotiations and put joint statements, which are, I agree, more powerful, I'd find it helpful to be able to tell my constituents and the country that actually what is the government's position going into those negotiations next week in America. Is the government's position, is the government's offer to say, yes, we should be recognised in Palestine immediately, and if it's not, then why not?
Mr. Speaker, I recognise the strength of feeling amongst constituents right across the country, including in the City of Lincoln. We go into the two-state solution conference clear in our commitments that the Palestinians have an inalienable right to a state which is safe and secure alongside Israel, and we're talking about, to our friends and allies, about the best method to secure that.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The government's decision to sanction 2 Israeli ministers is certainly welcome. However, does the Minister acknowledge that every limb of the Israeli state is carrying out a genocide against the Palestinian people of Gaza? Sanctions must be extended to the entire state of Israel. Not tomorrow, not in a week's time, not in another 18 months' time, alongside a full arms embargo and the expulsion of the Israeli ambassador.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the honourable gentleman for his question. He knows the long-standing position about determinations of breaches of international crimes. I want to be clear that our sanctions do not target the entirety of the Israeli people. They target 2 individuals who have been promulgating extremist rhetoric and action, who have breached the rights of the Palestinians. It is that breach of rights upon which we are focused.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We've been here almost every week talking about these issues. Although the sanctions are welcome, but every speaker is sending a clear message to the Minister today to recognise the state of Palestine. If we don't recognise the state of Palestine, there will be no Palestine to recognise. Now, the question for me is, what is preventing that recognition from happening, especially when the UK is amongst one of the 50 that is not in a position to be recognising Palestine? Do we need permission of Netanyahu to recognise Palestine, or anyone from his government to do that? Because if not, and we are independent of that decision, this decision should have been taken a long time ago.
I can confirm to the honourable gentleman that we don't need any permission for making policy decisions. If we did, I think the Israeli government would have a rather different attitude towards Britain's minister to the Middle East than they do. The position in relation to recognition is that we wish to provide a state in which Palestinians can live safe and secure side by side with the Israelis. Clearly, that looks distant at the moment for the reasons that the Honourable Gentleman says. Those reasons need to be addressed. We want to see progress, and we will consider our own position as part of the best possible way that we can make a contribution to those issues.
Sir Desmond Swain.
Sanctions are no remedy to the imperilled two-state solution. Is the Minister going to the conference with a plan?
The Honourable Gentleman always asks succinct and clear questions. I recognise, as the Honourable Gentleman will recall, I was a diplomat for a long time, and sanctions are no remedy. They are an expression of a failure in the international system, and we have heard, as my honourable friend has said, week on week about the agonies. We do go to the conference with a plan, but it is a conference called by our friends and allies, and we're discussing our approach closely with them.
Debbie Abrahams.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And can I just congratulate the Minister and all his team and officials for all that they have done. I do not underestimate the amount of work that has gone in, especially working with international allies to get where we have. But as you can see, there's always demand for more, as there should be, given what we know is going on. So can I add my voice to everybody else who said that hopefully this is the lead up to next week and the successful announcement with our allies about the recognition of the Palestinian state.
I thank the Honourable Lady for her kind words, both about me but also about the officials of the diplomatic service who have worked hard, tirelessly. I was, as I said to another member, to another honourable member, I was hoping that we could make this announcement even sooner, and it is through no fault of the hard-working British diplomatic service who have done everything that they can to try to ensure the most impactful sanctions announcement that we can.
Andrew George.
The two sanctioned ministers have been enabled by Prime Minister Netanyahu, who is himself subject to an international criminal court arrest warrant. I wonder what the government are going to do to make sure that is properly pursued. While I was in the West Bank only a week after the two Labour members were shamefully deported from that country, it's very clear that the settlements are taking over the West Bank very significantly. So what sanctions will the government take to ensure there is no trade with those settlements?
The settlements are not bound by the trade preferences between the UK and Israel. They must be properly labelled. They attract different tariffs, and they should be traded as such. Where there are breaches of those regulations, they should be investigated.
Darlington.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome the sanctions announced today by the Minister, taken in conjunction with our allies, and his commitment to a Palestinian state. However, people in Gaza are starving. I want to update the Minister on one such person, Dr. Roddy, the elderly and frail father of my constituent Mo Roddy. A few weeks ago, he sought shelter in Al-Arada Hospital with over 100 medical staff and patients, as he is a former practicing doctor there. There was no food allowed in. The IDF destroyed the main water tanks. The hospital was bombed, and when Dr. Roddy left the hospital, he was stripped and humiliated by the IDF. He is now hungry, ill, and alone, as the rest of his family in Gaza has been killed. What are we doing to protect the most vulnerable from dying by increasing aid, increasing evacuations, and ending the killing in Gaza?
My honourable friend describes a heartbreaking case of a family member of her constituent, which she's raised with me on a number of occasions, as have many other members across the House, and I'm usually not in a position to discuss those cases on the floor of the House. Where constituents and their families are affected, we will do everything that we can to try and support them. We've heard a great deal about the restrictions on aid, and it is candidly not easy to support people to leave Gaza, but where there is a UK connection, then I am always keen to do what I can to try and secure the safety of people.
Simon Harr.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome wholeheartedly the Minister's statement, welcome the sanctions, but fear that those who have just been sanctioned will either shrug their shoulders and say, so what, or worse, wear them as a badge of honour amongst their cohort. But casting forward to next week in the conference, I just want to ask the Minister, is he alert to and seized of what I think is a very significant development in this place, which is the very near unanimous support for a positive declaration from His Majesty's government towards a two-states solution with the recognition of Palestine. That is a very big step forward, and the nuance of the comments of my right honourable friend, the Shadow Foreign Secretary, I hope is not lost on the Minister either. He will also know that right honourable and honourable friends from across the spectrum of the Conservative Party have written twice to the Prime Minister, urging that course of action and pledging that we would give wholehearted, full-throated, full support to that initiative. I just hope the Minister knows that when he and officials go to that conference, he is armed with the goodwill of this place to give some dynamism and impetus to this process, to recognise Palestine, to show leadership, and to use our good offices amongst our allies in the region to bring as quickly as possible this utter torture to an end.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm a proud son of the Labour Party and have often attended most to developments within my own party, but it has not escaped me the many forceful interventions from the opposite benches on these questions, the many powerful speeches, particularly from those who previously held other views. They are important contributions. I know they are watched widely by our friends and allies across the world, and indeed by many in Israel, and I take full and sober note of them.
Henry Tufnell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm grateful to the Minister for his statement and for his work and that he's done and he continues to do on this issue. The people of Pembrokeshire watch in despair at the events unfolding on their TV screens, the death, the horror, the humanitarian catastrophe. And I would urge the Minister, as I add my voice and those of my constituents, that you need two states for a two-state solution. So when will the government recognise the state of Palestine?
I thank my honourable friend for the question, and I recognise the strength of feeling in Pembrokeshire and Lincoln and so many other places. I won't repeat for him the manifesto commitment upon which we were both elected. I'm sure his interest, like so many in this House, will be about the conference next week, and we, of course, are talking with our friends and allies about our approach to that.
Adam Dams.
An 11-year-old constituency wrote to me and simply said, "Why are we not doing more?" That sums up the outrage in Yeovil on the crisis in Gaza. So can the Minister tell my constituents what steps he has taken with allies to ensure all aid routes to Gaza are reopened and what consequences there will be if they're not?
The honourable gentleman's constituent asks a perfectly reasonable question, and I often feel in this House frustrated by my inability to say what we do diplomatically with our allies and partners, which I can't always advertise on the floor of the House as we're doing it. I'm sure it is obvious to many members that work was ongoing on this package of sanctions last week during the statement, and I understood the frustration from so many members, which I'm sure is shared by your 11-year-old constituent, that I could not say more then. I would like to reassure them and the House that whenever we are not in this place, we are working with our friends and allies behind the scene to try and reopen aid routes, secure the release of hostages, and ensure a two-state solution.
Andy Slaughter.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Sanctioning of Smotrich and Ben-Gvir is welcome news, not least because they are the loudest voices calling for annexation of the West Bank. But the settlement building and forced displacement of Palestinians is accelerating. Surely it is time to recognise Palestinian sovereignty over the 22% of Mandate Palestine that remains to them, before that too is entirely eaten away.
My right honourable friend makes, as ever, important and powerful contributions. I won't repeat the position on recognition, but we recognise the force of what my honourable friend says, which is that the situation has deteriorated. Settlements have increased very significantly over the last year, as has settlement violence, and it is unacceptable.
Dr Andrew Lewis.
Madam Deputy Speaker, it's a sad day when the UK government, the governments of New Zealand, Australia, Canada and Norway feel it necessary to sanction government ministers in the State of Israel, one of our closest allies. But it's the right thing to do. Although, can I counsel the Minister, if I could be so presumptuous, against performative politics and ask him how many mouths will be fed, how much violence against Palestinians in the West Bank will be avoided, averted, and how much closer are we to achieving the two-state solution we all want to see as a result of the action that he has announced today.
The honourable gentleman can, of course, counsel me as my predecessor, and I'm grateful for his support on the measures we've taken. As I said to one of my other predecessors, I recognise that sanctions are not a remedy. This will feed no Palestinians, and I hope it will deter, but we have no guarantees that it will save any Palestinian lives. But we think these are important statements of principle and actions that demonstrate not just to the two individuals, but to Israeli society where we stand on these questions.
Patricia Ferguson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As you will know, many of us have urged this course of action on the government for some time now, and the imposition of sanctions on these two individuals and others in the Israeli government is something that is perhaps over time. However, I very much welcome the Minister's statement this evening and the hard work that has gone into getting us to the point that we're now at. I understand the importance of working in concert with others, with our allies, but if the cooperation of our allies is not forthcoming, will the UK government, given the strength of feeling across the chamber, unilaterally recognise the state of Palestine?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I won't speculate too far on hypotheticals, but of course I'm a British minister. I take decisions on behalf of the British government. We will act alone where we have to, but we act whenever we can with our friends and allies. That is the way in which you have the greatest impact.
Pip Malthouse.
Deputy Speaker, the Minister laid out with some passion the dystopian hell that Gaza has become and the unfolding or ongoing disaster in the West Bank. So, as many members said, why then has he done absolutely the bare minimum? We all know in this House, after the previous rounds of sanctions, that there will be absolutely no difference on the ground, as others have said, for the Palestinians. And I said last week, and I'm sorry to be cynical about it, that I thought the House was being played. My confident prediction now, given this announcement, is that recognition, which was being advertised for the conference next week, is now off the table. Can he tell me that I'm wrong?
I recognise that the honourable gentleman has made these points with some force for the last year, but I would caution him to be quite as cynical as he is. We are doing everything that we can. We recognise that what we have announced today will not be a remedy in the way that I've just said to one of my predecessors to the situation that we find ourselves, but I'd encourage him not to be casting such cynicism around the government's motives. This government cares deeply about what is happening in Gaza. We are so incredibly frustrated by the scenes that meet us, meet everybody behind me, and I would say gently to the honourable gentleman, he has no monopoly on the morality of this situation.
Frank McNally.
Deputy Speaker, I'm grateful once again for my honourable friend coming to the House tonight and for the steps that have been taken given the despicable actions of the two Israeli ministers that have been cited throughout the course of this statement. And of course more must be done. Does he recognise the description by the UN Special Rapporteur characterising Israel's approach to aid delivery as essentially being brutal humanitarian camouflage? And what further measures will the government take to challenge grotesque attempts to use aid as a cover for ongoing violence towards Palestinians, including further sanctions and, critically, the recognition of a Palestinian state?
Thank you.
Madam Deputy Speaker, we have been very clear about the nature of the new aid arrangements involving the Gaza Humanitarian Funds. It has proven deadly and incapable of supplying aid at the levels which are so desperately needed. I've said so repeatedly, and we continue to make these points with force.
Sammy Wilson.
Madam Deputy Speaker, regardless of what one may think of the views expressed by the two ministers who are subject to sanctions today, the fact is this is nothing new. They've been saying it for a long time without sanctions. And the question that has to be asked today is, why now? The Minister must know that this will not bring peace to Gaza. It will not stop Israel pursuing the terrorists who it's bound to pursue in order to free the hostages and release its grip on Gaza and the danger that presents to Israel. So is this a case of the Minister pandering to the increasingly loud anti-Israel voices on his back benches? And does he not know that this will only encourage Hamas not to release the hostages and not to agree to a ceasefire?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I've spoken about the perilous decline of the situation in the West Bank and indeed events of the last 2 weeks, and I've also spoken about the importance of coordinating with allies, so I don't think I have anything further to say about the timing of the announcement.
Melanie Ward.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The government is right to sanction these Israeli ministers whose encouragement of mass atrocity crimes is an outrage. Further such action must follow quickly. Also an outrage is the news of starving Palestinians being shot and killed by Israeli soldiers and foreign mercenaries as they try to access aid in Gaza. Let me ask the Minister, as the fabric of Palestinian life is being destroyed by the Israeli military, and if the two-state solution is not to be an empty slogan, as he says, then isn't this the time for our country to unconditionally and immediately recognise the state of Palestine? If this is not the time, then when is?
I want to pay tribute to my honourable friend for her work as the Chief Executive of Medical Aid for Palestine. I recognise that there's almost nobody in this House who has more lived experience of what this crisis looks like. I won't add to my answers on recognition or the conference next week, but I pay tribute to her work, which was brave, courageous and important.
Sir Geoffrey Clifton-Brown.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Restrictions on aid, on fuel, on food and even water in Gaza is inhumane and unacceptable. If the Minister cannot get a decision next week to recognise the state of Palestine, will he at least ask for collective message to be sent to our allies, the Israelis, that these restrictions are unacceptable and unless they are reversed, serious consequences will follow?
I thank the honourable gentleman for his question. We have delivered that message with 26 partners on aid, and we have been clear that unless the situation changes, further actions will flow with the leaders of France and Canada. I won't repeat my answers about the conference next week, but I thank him for the important focus he puts on the humanitarian situation.
Paul Wall.
Deputy Speaker, can I warmly welcome today's decision by the UK Government to work with other international allies to sanction these extremist Israeli ministers. Just to remind ourselves just how extremist they are, Finance Minister Smotrich promised that not even a grain of wheat will enter the Gaza Strip.
This is a man whose extremism is against and his disregard for the Israeli hostages is only matched by his absolute contempt for Palestinian lives. He said, "It's good that the war has begun. It's unfortunate it started the way it did." Unfortunate. That's how he described October 7. Yeah. Unfortunate. So in the spirit of today's international alliance with other countries, will the government now seize the moment to recognise the state of Palestine next week in New York?
I thank my honourable friend. He's very committed to these issues, and he rightly points to some of the rhetoric and extremist language that has been used by these two men. I won't repeat my answers in relation to the conference next week. We will work with our friends and allies on our approach.
Vicky Slade.
The Foreign Secretary summoned the Israeli ambassador to meet the minister 2 weeks ago, and we were asked in that exchange to wait and see what positive steps would come from the meeting. Since then, we've seen violence and attacks increased by the State of Israel on vulnerable people. The ambassador has repeatedly rejected a two-state solution. So given that 200,000 people have now signed a petition to expel her from this country, has the minister given any consideration to further action on the ambassador?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I summoned the Israeli ambassador. I set out the strength of views to the Israeli government that the British government feels on these questions. It is of vital importance that we have an Israeli ambassador. Whatever the views of this House, it is important that we maintain relations. We also have an ambassador from Iran in London, and that is important too. We need to be able to deliver messages to friends, allies, and those with whom we do not enjoy good relations. We will continue to host ambassadors because of the importance of maintaining those diplomatic relations.
Andy MacDonald.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Minister was absolutely right. Our dispute and anger is not with the Israeli people. It is with their leaders who use the murderous forces to inflict this annihilation on the Palestinian people. But the Minister said that sanctions aren't remedies, and they're an expression of our opinion. But the acid test is whether these measures will actually have an impact, will bring about the end to the killing. And I've just got to respectfully disagree with the Minister, because as a state party to the Genocide, Geneva and Vienna Conventions, the UK has a binding obligation to prevent genocide, refrain from recognising or aiding or assisting in illegal situations arising from serious breaches of peremptory norms of international law, and to avoid trade, funding or cooperation that enables or legitimises these violations. So I ask my honourable friend, will he give an undertaking to this House to come back in short order to announce further sanctions that will concentrate the mind? Because the fear is that these will not. And we also indicate whether, in the absence of a firm commitment to recognise the state of Palestine, that he will confirm that His Majesty's government will support a vote in this House by other means to express that recognition of Palestine.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I've come to this House on a number of occasions to talk about a number of things that the British government has done in relation to this situation. When I say sanctions are no remedy, they are no remedy in this situation. They are so often not a remedy in the many circumstances in which we apply them. I feel much greater satisfaction when we announce positive steps, when we announce aid that has gone in, when we announce partnerships with the region. It is with regret, always, that we announce sanctions. And I won't speculate on what further that we may introduce in this case or any other in the way that the honourable gentleman will be familiar. I recognise the limitations of sanctions, but under these circumstances, the government judged that we had no choice but to express the strength of our feeling through sanctions. And on the questions of international humanitarian law, I'll repeat once again this government's commitment to abiding by all our IHL obligations.
Martin Vickers.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.
I've spoken on a number of occasions in recent weeks about recognition of Palestine, and I've put on record again that I think we should proceed with that, and certainly a vote in this House, as was suggested a moment ago, would strengthen the government's position and I would have thought be helpful in international negotiations. You mentioned 4 other countries who have sanctioned the 2 ministers today. Is he anticipating that further countries will follow suit, and what negotiations are taking place in order to achieve that goal?
Madam Deputy Speaker, we have had discussions with other countries, but I wouldn't wish at this dispatch box to speculate on what steps they may take following this.
Cat Eccles.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I refer members to my entry in the Register of Interests? I recently visited Israel and Palestine on a delegation and met with opposition leaders, and their top ask from the UK that would be helpful for them was strong sanctions. So I welcome the Minister's statement today, but does he not agree with me that we should be taking strong sanctions on all ministers in the Israeli government? This is not just about rhetoric, it is about actions. Thousands of deaths in Gaza. I think we need to see stronger sanctions on all ministers in the Israeli government.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I thank my honourable friend for the question and for the effort she has put in to travel to the area and to meet those in Israel and beyond. To be clear, these are not sanctions announced on the 2 ministries that the men represent. These are sanctions on the men themselves and the extremist rhetoric that they are responsible for. So we would keep further sanctions under review on individuals who conducted rhetoric of that kind.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome the sanctions that have been announced on these 2 individuals, but believe they should go further. The Minister said in his statement that there were no arms now going to Israel, but he was unclear as to the component parts for F-35 jets that are still in the global supply chain and presumably could be bought by Israel, and he was silent on the issue of the use of RAF Akrotiri and the flights that overfly Gaza. Is security cooperation continuing with Israel? Is information being given to Israel that they can use to continue the disgraceful and disgusting bombing of starving people in Gaza?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm grateful to the Right Honourable Gentleman for the opportunity to clarify. The British Government is not providing information to enable the bombing campaign in Gaza. The decisions that we took in relation to arms suspension bind the whole government. They are not just the decisions of the Foreign Office, and they represent a sober, reasoned, serious analysis of the risks of breaches of international humanitarian law, and they bind the government in our approach. I would take brief issue with the Right Honourable Gentleman's characterisation of my remarks. I have been clear on the F-35 point. We continue to be clear on that point, and we indeed have explained it at length in court.
Paula Barker.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Minister for coming to the House today to make the statement and for the strong action this government is taking to make clear we hold no truck with extremists who care nothing for peace. But we must go further. The Minister will know the strength of feeling on these benches on this issue, and particularly on the recognition of a Palestinian state. And I re-impress that upon him and hope that he's here in a fortnight's time as the Minister who recognised Palestine. Can the Minister also advise the House what discussions he is having about the appalling interception of British flag jobs, Madeleine, preventing much needed aid, yet again reaching the Palestinian people?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I thank my honourable friend for her kind words. And while I'm always glad to come to the House, I can reassure her constituents and those of many members behind me that even were I not glad to come to the House, they would certainly summon me. So I am always glad to answer questions from my honourable friend and others behind and in front of me. In relation to the Madeleine, I can confirm to my honourable friend that the UK pressed the Israeli authorities before the arrival to ensure that any action taken was in line with international law, was undertaken with would be undertaken with restraint, and would resolve safely for the passengers on board.
Brian Matthews.
Madam Deputy Speaker, next week I'll be meeting families of some of the remaining Israeli hostages. I'm sure the whole House will want their safe return and want peace at last for the Palestinian population of Gaza and the West Bank. The killing and the misery and the starvation and the genocide has gone on for far too long. Will the government do the right thing and recognise the state of Palestine now? For a two-state solution, there must be two states. Thank you.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I won't rehearse the arguments on recognition, but I know so many members of the House, myself included, have met hostage families who view the events with terrible dismay, and I won't put words in their mouth from this dispatch box. Their views are varied, their distress and their anger is palpable, and we have them in our thoughts every day.
Christine Sullivan.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Minister for coming here today and for his statement and the announcement of sanctions. We've all watched with horror the scenes of desperate people trying to access food, the very basic thing that we need to survive. And whilst our constituents may be, we can understand why our constituents have a sense of hopelessness, we should not have that in this place because we have considerable agency. So I would like to ask the Minister what steps he's taking to work with allies and aid organisations to establish secure maritime corridors for humanitarian aid to Gaza. And does he agree with me and members across this House that now is the time to recognise an independent sovereign state of Palestine?
I welcome the tone and the spirit of my honourable friend's question. We do have agency in this House. The frustrations that are felt by so many, both within it and without it, are completely understandable and justifiable. We, as this government, we have sought change. We have been frustrated by how slow that change has been, but we will continue to work for a better situation for those in Gaza, for those in West Bank, and of course for those in Israel as well. She asks about maritime corridors, which are an important but ultimately relatively peripheral part of any aid operation, if it is to be at the scale required. There were maritime corridors supported in an earlier phase of the conflict, and they did important work. But in the end, the three road crossings into Jordan, Egypt, and Israel itself is the most practical, most viable, and tried and tested route to get aid in at the scale and the flexibility required to meet the needs of those in the Strip.
Ellie Chance.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome the announcement of sanctions on two extremist ministers. It is long overdue, and it is a bare minimum. On its own, it's likely to do little to stop extremist, illegal settlements and violence against Palestinian civilians. So can I ask the Minister, when will the government implement a ban on settlement goods to stop the economy that fuels illegal settlements? And will the Minister today clearly and unequivocally call for illegal settlements to be dismantled, as the ICJ has directed?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I won't repeat the answer about settlement goods that I gave earlier, but I want to be absolutely clear for the House that settlements are illegal under Israeli and international law, and they should be dismantled.
Clive Betts. Sorry, he's gone. Apologies. Helen Hayes.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I welcome the sanctions on Israeli government ministers that have been announced today? Those two particular ministers have been showing the world who they are for a long time, and this step, while welcome, is long overdue. The minister speaks of the peril of the two-state solution. There cannot be a two-state solution that is realised without two states. So can I ask him to take with him to the summit next week the clearly expressed will of this House that this government takes a lead in the recognition of the Palestinian state? And can I ask him, is it not time for a full ban on settlement goods so that we can be sure that consumers in this country are playing no part in what is a clear strategic attempt to undermine even the possibility of a two-state solution?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I've heard the powerful interventions from my honourable friend and many others across the House on both the questions of recognition and indeed on settlement goods. The questions surrounding settlement goods are one of differentiating between Israeli goods, as in within Green Line Israel, and those in illegal settlements. Illegal settlement goods are not eligible to the same trade provisions as those from within Green Line Israel, and to breach that labelling requirement, and so not to be clear where the goods are produced, is a breach of the relevant regulations.
Mike Martin.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'd just like to clarify some remarks that the Minister said earlier in response to questions from my honourable friend for St Ives, and also in his previous answer. So the trade in goods from settlements attracts a higher tariff, the Minister said earlier. So can the Minister confirm that the British government, through raising tariffs and taxes on this trade, is making money out of the settlements, the illegal settlements in the West Bank? And does he think that this is acceptable?
Not quite, Madam Deputy Speaker. There are trade arrangements between the UK and Israel. We consider Israel as Green Line Israel. We do not consider the occupied Palestinian territories and the settlements within them as part of Green Line Israel. We have separate arrangements with the Palestinian Authority. So goods produced in illegal settlements should be labelled as such. That is not, let me clarify, a money-making scheme for the British government.
Alistair Strathern.
Deputy Speaker, having had a number of conversations with the Minister about the importance of renewed sanctions, can I wholeheartedly welcome today's announcement. These two ministers' comments go well beyond what could be tolerated or accepted or explained away, and I'm really glad that we played a leading role in pulling together international partners to take a stand on this. But as the ministers pointed out, the humanitarian situation on the ground is getting increasingly dire for Gazans who have been long deprived of the access to aid they desperately need. So with this renewed call for international action that he's so clearly laid down today, how are we working with international partners to apply more pressure to Israel to finally get those land routes open and uninhibited flows of aid back to the Palestinian people?
I thank my honourable friend for his commitment to these issues and this important question. As the House will see, the UK has led with 26 of our allies on a statement on humanitarian issues, three leaders from the UK, France and Canada, and today 5 others in relation to sanctions on these two men. I can assure the House that we will work with a range of our partners in different formats in order to achieve the objectives that I know are felt so keenly right across the House.
Shawkat Adam.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Ben Devere is so extreme that the Israeli government themselves banned him from joining the army. That was 3 decades ago. So if the Minister can please excuse me, I am not going to extend a warm welcome to this announcement. But the matter is this, is a matter of trust. The government tells us they're going to seize arms sales to Israel, yet F-35 parts get to Israel, massacring young children. The government tells us they're appalled by the actions of the Israeli government, yet front-bench government ministers find themselves partying with the Israeli ambassador and Holocaust trivializers. The government tells us that they are seizing trade deals with Israel, yet the very next week, a trade envoy is sent to Israel, drumming up business. Who is the government trying to fool?
Madam, it's a shame the honourable member doesn't feel in a position to welcome these announcements. These are important steps taken with our allies. The UK is leading the world on these issues, and we will continue to do so.
Mary Kelly-Foy.
Thank
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome the actions that the Minister has announced today, but we can no longer allow starving men, women and children to be murdered in cold blood while scrambling for food, while visiting cemeteries at Eid or being burned alive in their houses. Will the Minister please be bolder, listen to the voices here tonight and lead the way and call for the state of Palestine, just to give hope even to those Palestinians who are already working for peace and the right to self-determination?
My honourable friend has a long interest in the communities of the regions, and I recognise the emotion in her remarks. We have talked this evening, Madam Deputy Speaker, about sanctions, we have talked about recognition, and we have talked about aid. Hope will not feed the hungry people of the Gaza Strip. We will not cease until proper aid provision is provided to all of those who need it in the Strip. And I won't repeat the answers I've already given about recognition.
Nira Wilson.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. The sanctions on the appalling extremists Ben Gvir and Smotrich, whilst extremely overdue, are welcome, and we on these Liberal Democrat benches have been calling for them for some 16 months now. Now, the Minister acknowledged in his statement that there's cross-party support for a two-state solution, and he also said, and I quote, "When we say something, we mean it." Yet he has repeatedly refused tonight to acknowledge and to recognise the state of Palestine or commit to recognising it at the summit next week. And I remain wholly unconvinced by his reasons for refusing to do so. So let me try a different tack, Madam Deputy Speaker. This evening there are reports that the US Ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, has stated that the US is no longer pursuing the goal of an independent state of Palestine. Will this now bring a new urgency to recognising the state of Palestine for the UK to stand up and assume its historic responsibility in the region when Trump is abandoning the Palestinians?
Madam Speaker, I have answered the question about the approach to the conference, and I have sought in my comments to be as clear as I possibly can with the House about the importance of conducting some diplomacy, not on the floor of the House, but with our allies and friends in advance of such an important moment as next week, and that is the approach we'll be taking.
Oliver Ryan.
Deputy Speaker, can I thank the Minister for his commitment to peace, his unrelenting, tireless work for that peace, and can I say to him, a two-state solution must be protected. We can't let that light, that hope, relinquish, and he's quite right in the comments that he's made. This strong action today is right and is welcomed by many in my constituency in Burnley. Will he keep getting tougher? Will he get more aid in? Will he stop the settler violence, stop the illegal settlements? And will he take a message from this House today and this country to protect Palestinians and their right to self-determination?
I thank my honourable friend from Burnley. He's been adamantly committed to these issues. He sets out all the right objectives, and I can confirm to him that I will take that message.
Richard Ford.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Last October, Lord Cameron said that as Foreign Secretary he had been working up plans to sanction extreme right-wing ministers Smotrich and Ben Gvir. What took the government so long?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I hear many reports of what was being done in the Foreign Office before I got there on these questions. I think the House will probably agree that since we arrived we took a rather different approach across a whole range of questions, whether it was restoring funding to UNRWA on my very first day as a Minister, the steps that we have discussed already at some length. So interesting to hear Lord Cameron's recollections, but I'm not sure that we will be taking very many lessons.
Sarah Owen.
Madam Deputy Speaker, a British surgeon in Gaza described it as a slaughterhouse. Babies are starving. Roads to aid are being described as combat zones by the IDF. So I welcome the sanctions on Israeli ministers who stated, and I quote, that they are destroying everything that remains in Gaza. Their actions bear all the hallmarks of ethnic cleansing and plausible genocide. It is clear that the majority inside this place want to recognise the state of Palestine, as do many of the public. So will the Minister feed this strength of feeling back to the Prime Minister that we want to recognise Palestine and we want to recognise it now?
I thank my honourable friend for the question, and I know how strongly she feels on these questions, how strongly Luton feels on these questions, as indeed so many in Lincoln, Burnley and elsewhere do as well, and I will take that message.
Robin Swan.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. A two-state solution requires all sides to see that as achievable, desirable and sustainable. So what practical steps is the government taking with international partners to rebuild and support the Palestinian Authority? And how will they ensure that Hamas will have no role in Palestinian governance, as he says in his statement?
Madam Deputy Speaker, the honourable gentleman asks a vital question. That was one of the central focuses of the visit of the Palestinian Prime Minister to the UK, of the Memorandum of Understanding that we agreed with him, and we welcome the recent statements of the Palestinian Authority of some of the vital reforms, including on the so-called pay-to-slay provisions for welfare, and indeed some of their statements in recent days that Hamas must have no role in the future governance of Gaza.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I thank the Minister on his statement. Certainly welcome the sanctions against the two ministers, but the collective responsibility would dictate that the whole Cabinet is complicit, and perhaps the sanctions should have gone further. Human rights abuses are happening right in front of us. Settler violence is at record numbers. Legal settlements are being constructed. Over 55,000 innocent men, women and children have died. Humanitarian aid is being cruelly withheld. Does the Minister agree that the recognition of the Palestinian state is the next step that must take place?
I thank my honourable friend for his commitment to these issues. I won't add further on the answers on recognition that I've already gave, nor indeed on speculate further on where future sanctions might be targeted.
Susan Murray.
Madam Deputy Speaker. To echo the member opposite, people in Gaza are starving. Those people are children, the sick and the elderly. The operation of the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation is insufficient and unworkable. Will the government not just press for, but develop an alternative plan to take aid into the Strip through a humanitarian corridor sponsored by the UN?
Madam Deputy Speaker, an alternative exists, an alternative that is tried and tested, that has been developed over the course of this conflict, and it's called the United Nations and the international NGO community. We do not need to reinvent the wheel. The UK and its partners already have a model available, ready and waiting, with British aid, amongst many others, waiting in places like Al Arish, right close to the border with the Strip. That operation must be allowed to proceed.
Tulip Sadiq.
Deputy Speaker, innocent Palestinian civilians face a horrific choice. Either they die of starvation or they risk being killed while they queue up for aid. I welcome the sanctions announced by the Minister today, but I want to press him on a bit more detail on the engagement that he's had with our international allies about putting collective pressure on the Israeli government about allowing free-flowing aid into Gaza for those who need it most and who are in this situation through no fault of their own.
Madam Deputy Speaker, as I've said, we have worked with 26 partners on a statement on humanitarian issues, 5 partners today on sanctions, 3 leaders. We will be joining our friends and allies at the Two-State Solution Conference next week, and I can assure my honourable friend that we will continue to work with friends and allies in a variety of formats in order to press these points.
Freddie Van Mierlo.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. May I pay tribute to the work of my Oxfordshire neighbour, the Honourable Member for Oxford West and Abingdon, for her work in trying to get Palestine recognised. She has brought forward bills to this House for many, many years to that effect. And may I also extend my thoughts to all UK Palestinians living here, fearing for their families in Gaza. Will he tell us if he has heard the wishes of this House tonight in recognising Palestinian statehood, And will he also outline the steps the government is taking to make sure baby formula, in particular, gets through as aid into the strip? We are seeing mothers unable to feed their children, and it is absolutely terrifying to watch on TV. And I really hope that he will press that matter in particular.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I of course hear the voice of all parliamentarians when they make their interventions over the course of this and the many other occasions that we've had to discuss these issues. The honourable gentleman, as other members have, presses me on one of many life-saving elements that are not currently going into the strip in the volumes required, and whether it's medical provision, baby food, or indeed just the basic nutritional content to deal with the famine that the IPC report warns all those in Gaza are at risk of. There is an urgent need for all such items to get in, and I can assure him that we press that point with vigour.
Alex Ballinger.
Speaker, and I welcome the sanctions on extremist ministers Ben-Gvir and Smotrich. It's their dehumanising rhetoric that has really contributed to the land grabbing in the West Bank and the destructive situation we're now seeing in Gaza. So I want to thank the Minister and the Foreign Secretary for coordinating internationally on this, because I know our actions together are more powerful. Will he also coordinate on the devastating humanitarian situation, the the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, private military contractors? We are seeing civilians walking miles to get food, and indeed some of them are being killed by the Israeli Defence Forces simply queuing to get a meal in the state that they're in. So will he coordinate with his international partners to put pressure to challenge this illegal and cruel mechanism, and what steps will he be taking next week to ensure that the UK recognises a Palestinian state?
Madam Speaker, my honourable friend rightly points to the limitations in the Gaza Humanitarian Fund. It's a model that has proven deadly and incapable of supplying aid at the scale required. We have coordinated with our partners in the way that I've described. We'll be co-chairing with Egypt a working group on reconstruction of Gaza next week, and I assure him, as I have other members, that we will continue to work with our international partners on these questions until the situation improves.
Carla Lockhart.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. This government appears willing to sanction elected Israeli ministers, while groups that have openly supported the terrorists who carried out the October 7th terrorist atrocities are being platformed at events like Glastonbury. It certainly screams of double standards, and sadly, it is the Jewish people in the UK who are left to face the consequences, who can't walk the streets of London without being harassed. How can the UK sanction people who don't live here, but yet those who share their hatred walk freely amongst us?
Madam Speaker, I condemn anti-Semitic incidents in London or anywhere else unreservedly. But let me be clear: Hamas is proscribed. The whole organisation in the UK. We do not make the careful delineation that I have made this afternoon in relation to Israeli ministers about Hamas. The whole lock-stock organisation is prescribed by the UK Home Office. That has force under law. It doesn't matter whether they're here or not. And we continue to call on them to release hostages, to return to a ceasefire, and to have no future role in the governance of Gaza.
Alex Sobel.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. On the 23rd of May, I stood in this exact spot and asked the Foreign Secretary to sanction Ben-Gvir and Smotrich. I thank the government for its action today, but the Palestinian people are now at existential crisis. Even this week, we saw the Israeli military board a British-flagged vessel in international waters and confiscate that vessel. We're seeing mass starvation event in Gaza continuing, and as the Minister has said, increasing settlement action in the West Bank. I've been a senior member of the Palestinian Authority, and I'm proud that the Prime Minister took the Prime Minister of the Palestinian Authority into Downing Street, and that we have a trade envoy to Palestine. The Palestinian Authority is a government under occupation, has all of the effects of government. What is stopping us recognising them as the legitimate government of a state? What's the Minister's view of the Palestinian Authority?
The Palestinian Authority are a central part of our view for a two-state solution. We want to see them reformed and strengthened. We want to see them in control of both Gaza and the West Bank, and the MOU that we signed with the Prime Minister of the Palestinian Authority, Mr. Mustafa, was part of those efforts.
Iqbal Mohammed.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I will actually pay gratitude to the Minister for his personal efforts to try and achieve some level of justice, and the attempts to get aid into Palestine and Gaza to save lives. However, as a new member, I've been standing here for 11 months and standing on the coattails of many right honourable and honourable members who have gone before me and who are here today. Have been fighting this cause for many years before I arrived. We have only heard words after words and rhetoric from the government with no real meaningful action that has, beyond the aid that was allowed in earlier, saved lives. So what steps is the government taking to finally get aid into Gaza to save the babies, the starving children, the mothers, and all of humanity? Because without that, tens of thousands of people will not be here in the next few days.
I thank the honourable gentleman for his kind words. The steps that we have taken have been concrete, but he is right that there remains terrible risks of famine and indeed other circumstances which fall to people when adequate aid is not allowed in, where proper water and sanitation provision is not provided. The risks of further humanitarian catastrophe are considerable, and we will continue to press these points with the Israeli government alongside friends and allies.
Rachel Maskell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. If the UK Government fails to recognise the State of Palestine next week, what message will it send to the perpetrators of this genocide, and what message will it send to the suffering Palestinians?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I don't think I have very much to add on our approach to the conference next week.
Helen Maguire.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's vital that we get a clear and accurate picture of what exactly is happening on the ground. This is absolutely essential to ensure transparency. And so what is this government doing to progress access for journalists into Gaza?
This is a vital question from the Honourable Lady. She knows journalists are not able to operate in Gaza, and indeed aid workers. Most aid workers are not able to operate in Gaza. That provides considerable uncertainty about the events that are happening within Gaza. We are calling both for journalistic access and for aid workers, but vitally that those people are also protected. There have been more aid workers killed, many more journalists killed than anyone in this House could accept. We want people able to go in, to deliver aid, to report freely, and to be protected through deconfliction mechanisms.
Kirith Entwistle.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Every day I wake to news of further atrocities in Gaza, and every single week my constituents come to me asking me to put more pressure on our government to go further and faster. Madam Deputy Speaker, whilst I welcome the news today of sanctions and I commend the Minister for his hard work, surely this is just the beginning, because just as the Minister said, the gravity of the situation demands further action. We must ensure accountability for all breaches of international humanitarian law. So when will we recognise the State of Palestine, and how will we ensure vital aid reaches people in Gaza who are beyond desperate?
I can reassure my honourable friend's constituents that she does indeed press me on these issues, as do so many on my own benches and those across the House. I'm not sure I entirely agree with her characterisation that this is the beginning, but I can assure her it is not the end. It is not the end until progress is made.
Ayub Khan.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I certainly welcome the statement from the Minister with the imposition of sanctions on the two Israeli ministers. Although late in the day, nonetheless, it requires our gratitude. Given that we have now adopted this new precedent, will the Minister agree that any member of the Knesset using language similar to the two Israeli ministers will receive similar sanctions?
I thank the honourable gentleman for his question and the tone in which he asks it. I won't set out hypothetical circumstances under which we may take further sanction action from this dispatch box, but I will reaffirm to him that the question at issue in these sanctions is the breach of Palestinian human rights. That is the basis on which we will consider further sanctions.
Devendu Mishra.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the Minister for this important statement? But the reality is that 93% of children in Gaza, around 930,000 children, are facing the critical risk of famine. So the Minister has outlined what the government has been doing in the past few months and continues to do so. But could you tell us what more could the British government do to make sure that food and medicine reach people who are starving?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I thank my honourable friend for the question, and I can assure him that we're doing all we can to try and ensure that food and medicine reaches children in Gaza and indeed all those in need, and I will return to this House when I have further announcements.
Jim Shannon.
Deputy Speaker, the Minister is much respected in this House. I have to answer my question. The Minister has been at pains to emphasise that these sanctions are made in a personal capacity and not a government capacity, and yet already media headlines out there outside are creating the image that Israel is being sanctioned. So will the Minister underline and state the unwavering support that Israel has from this Minister and this government in their battle for survival against the continued Hamas terrorism, so there can be no doubt that this nation remains standing with Israel? Thank you so much.
As ever, I thank the honourable gentleman for his kind words and his courtesy in this House, and I can reaffirm that this government supports the existence of the State of Israel, and we will continue to stand in its defence when required.
We're Just.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I thank the Minister for his statement, for his hard work, and I do believe he is genuinely concerned with what is happening in Gaza. We all want a two-state solution, a safe and secure Israel and a sovereign state of Palestine. And we have already said that the illegal settlements of Israel are something that we condemn. We recognise the state of Israel. Can the Minister please give an explanation as to why we cannot now recognise the state of Palestine?
I thank my honourable friend for his kind words and his important question. He knows our commitments to a Palestinian state as set out in our manifesto, and I won't rehearse them. It is our job as the British government to create the conditions in which a Palestinian state can be viable and sovereign and live in safety alongside a safe and secure Israel, and it's to that task that we continue to put our efforts.
Joanna Baxter.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I thank my honourable friend for his statement, and I welcome the sanctions that have been taken today against Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, because their rhetoric and their actions towards the Palestinian people are dangerous and extremist. But this is the third set of sanctions imposed by our government against violent settlers and settlement entities, and it unfortunately has not stopped food being used as a weapon of war. So can I ask my honourable friend, what does he think will stop food being used as a weapon of war, and what more can we do to ensure that humanitarian aid is delivered into Gaza as a matter of urgency?
My honourable friend is exactly right to highlight the importance that aid is not used in service of a military or a political objective. It must be delivered in a principled way in accordance with humanitarian principles. The United Nations and our international NGO partners have long experience of delivering aid in that way, and that is why I said over the course of the evening, Madam Deputy Speaker, that we have an alternative that will work to the GHF, and that is the UN supported operation.
Lillian Jones.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome the Minister's statement to the House tonight and the steps UK Government has taken thus far. Now, humanitarian assistance must not be obstructed, politicised or treated as a threat. Can the Minister set out what concrete steps UK Government has taken to ensure that aid reaches all areas of Gaza without further delay or interference by the Israeli Defence Forces, to allow aid workers to carry out their life-saving work without fear of injury or life, and to secure the release of hostages back to their families, and to finally recognise the State of Palestine?
I thank my honourable friend for the question. In relation to aid provision within Gaza, there has been, as I know my honourable friend will be aware, much discussion on the importance of there being multiple distribution sites far in excess of those currently available. That helps manage the pressures, provides more humane conditions for aid delivery, and that is what we want to see in the strip.
Sam Rushworth.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I thank the Minister for his diligence and patient answers tonight and for an excellent statement. I agreed with every word of it, and I appreciate the actions that the Government has taken to sanction two ministers, both of whom have expressed genocidal intent. The Minister is also correct in saying that the two-state solution is in peril. It seems from today that there is an overwhelming majority in this place that support an immediate recognition of Palestine, and I sense from his answers that the Government is moving in that direction. But what can he also do around the ICJ judgment that the West Bank has been annexed? And what more can we do to ensure that others are punished for their crimes in the West Bank?
I thank my honourable friend for his kind words and this important question. I am sure, with the permission of the Speaker, I'll be back in this House next week to discuss recognition and events at the conference in greater detail. On the question of the advisory opinion, which is, as I know my honourable friend knows, is a far-reaching and complex advisory opinion, we'll return to this House when we're in a position to give a full response to what is a complex and novel legal opinion.
Olivia Blake.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Minister for his strong statement today and for the sanctions he's outlined. I listened carefully to his words. He spoke of the risk of empty slogans on the path to a two-state solution. I agree, but I fear we will be the last generation of diplomats and politicians with the option of recognition of the State of Palestine on the table. Will he reflect on that before the meeting next week?
Madam Deputy Speaker, my honourable friend asked an important question. It is very much on the minds of all those in the Government who work on these issues that the viability of a two-state solution requires physical facts on the ground. It requires territory for two states, and clearly illegal settlements proceeding at the rate that I described in the statement is a impediment and a threat to that two-state solution.
Claire Hughes.
Speaker. Can I thank my right honourable friend for his statement? I warmly welcome the actions that have been announced today. This Government said that it would take concrete actions, and it has. But given the urgency of the situation facing millions of Gazans with starvation just around the corner, and what we know about what the Israeli government has done so far, could I respectfully ask the Minister to tell us what next?
I thank my honourable friend both for her kind words, Madam Deputy Speaker, but also her commitment on these issues. I can reassure her constituents as well that she raises them with me regularly. I am sure I will return to this House with your permission next week to talk about the conference and indeed the next steps. I hope, Madam Deputy Speaker, that the situation improves, that we see aid reaching Gaza, that we see a ceasefire, and that we can start to talk about these issues in a more measured way in this House, reflecting that the situation is not as urgent as it is today, but until that time I'm sure I'll be returning to the House with further updates as I have them.
Kim Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I really welcome the Minister's announcement on the sanctions of these two racist and extremist ministers, but it does not go far enough. It's not going to stop the expansion or the settle of violence, because we know that the expansion is state-funded, state-sanctioned and supported. But what we need now is a recognition of a Palestinian state. And I hope that the Minister comes back here next week to inform the House that that has happened. And if that's the case, what is the next step once recognition is agreed?
Madam Deputy Speaker, my honourable friend is committed to these issues, though I'm sure she wouldn't expect me to speculate at this point about what hypothetical next steps will be. I'm sure I will be returned to this House, and I'm sure I'll be continuing to discuss these issues with her.
Mark Sewards.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I refer members to my register of interest, having visited both Israel and Palestine just a few weeks ago. I welcome the Minister's statement today. Sanctioning these two extremist individuals is exactly the right thing to do. They are enemies of peace, and no two-state solution will ever be achieved while they are in post. It's also clear to me that Prime Minister Netanyahu has come to rely on these two ministers for his political survival. And the feeling on the ground in Israel, amongst ordinary Israelis, backed up by consistent polling, is that they do not support their Prime Minister, and they will change their government at the first opportunity at the next election. So will the Minister set out how the UK government can not only sanction those that seek to destroy peace, but also support those who champion moderation, who champion peacemaking in the region, both in Palestine and in Israel?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm grateful to my honourable friend both for the question and the travel I know he undertook recently. As I'm sure he would expect, I won't be drawn on questions of Israel's democratic process. Clearly, their elections are a matter for them, but I can assure him that we do everything that we can to try and support peacemakers on both sides of this conflict to find common cause.
Harpreet Uppal. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I absolutely welcome the sanctions. And can I pay tribute to my honourable friend for all his hard work and the work of officials? Thank you for everything that you're doing. Can I also ask him, as other colleagues have, to ensure that we can recognise Palestine at the UN conference? This will be a big moment. And finally, if I could just mention the US. The US is a key partner in this work. And you'll know, the honourable member will know, the Minister will know, should I say, that the US ambassador to Israel has said the goal of an independent Palestinian state is no longer something that they are pursuing. So what discussions are we having with the US on that? Thank you.
Madam Deputy Speaker, my honourable friend is very kind, and I'm grateful for her words, and she's very welcome to call me honourable friend. The questions that she raises are key. Of course, we discuss these issues with our friends and our allies. Not all of our positions are the same, but I will always set out with clarity, both from this dispatch box and in all of my diplomatic engagements, the position of the UK government.
Tracy Gilbert.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome the sanctions outlined by my honourable friend today, and I thank him for all the work that he has done. I know his commitment to the Palestinian people and the concerns that he has and shares with us on a regular basis. The action has been required for some time. The up-and-coming UN conference on a two-state solution is an opportunity to work with allies or alone to recognise the Palestinian state. And can I add my voice to that request? And may I ask my right honourable friend, if not then, when?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm once again going to thank my honourable friend for her kind words and recognise her force of feeling around the questions of recognition. As I said earlier, I'm sure I'll be back in this House and continue to discuss these issues with her.
James Asser.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I very much welcome the recognition in the statement today of what's going on in the West Bank. I raised the issue of settler violence and suppression of Palestinian rights several weeks ago in the House, following the disgraceful events we saw over Easter, the suppression of worship. So I very much welcome the sanctions we've seen today. My honourable friend talks about a two-state solution, but as other honourable members have said, you need two states for a two-state solution. What we are seeing from the Israeli government is a very clear attempt to stop there being a viable Palestinian state. What my constituents want, what the Palestinian people want, is recognition. We need to do more. Next week is the perfect opportunity for us to recognise a Palestinian state. It is needed now.
I thank my honourable friend. He points to his long record with which I'm very much familiar of pressing these points, and he's right to say that a two-state solution clearly requires two states, and it is vital that nobody, not in Israel or anywhere else, forecloses that possibility.
Holly Billington.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome these sanctions, which need to be seen in the context of £129 million of extra aid, the refunding of UNRWA, sanctions for settlers, suspension of arms trade, and also, importantly, the suspension of the trade negotiations. That is the context of the action by this government. However, the suffering goes on, and it is not accidental. It is deliberate. The achievement of these sanctions today is because this government worked with other governments. We know we achieve more together than we do alone. In that context, with the summit next week, can the Minister take the message from this House, across this House, and from all of our constituencies and communities, that Britain wants a recognition of the Palestinian state unequivocally and immediately and unconditionally. That is a message from Britain to the summit next week.
Madam Deputy Speaker, my honourable friend speaks with real force and authority, and I have heard her message clearly.
Graham Downey.
Thanks very much. Madam Deputy Speaker, this Israeli government continues to perpetrate horrific and appalling violence against Palestinian people that is also against the interests of Israel and Israeli people, while we know Hamas is only interested in death and destruction. I welcome the action today as a sign of willingness to take action against anyone who might be a bar or a block to a two-state solution. The Minister has already heard across the House and been urged to take specific steps, but will he confirm what options actually are open to him to support and strengthen the overwhelming majority of Israelis and Palestinians who want a peaceful future, but also action he is able to take against anyone who is a bar to a two-state solution in the future?
I thank my honourable friend for the question. He rightly focuses on the important questions at issue, which are how do we maintain the viability of a two-state solution. That is the only route to peaceful harmony, two states side by side, and it's to that objective that our efforts are focused.
Scott Arthur.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Minister for his leadership on this issue. One of the most regular attendees at my surgeries is a Palestinian woman. She's lost both friends and family in this conflict. Her cousin died recently. And each time she comes, Madam Deputy Speaker, it gets harder for me to tell her that this government is doing all it can to protect the lives and rights of Palestinians. On Saturday, she came to my surgery. She brought a gift because it was Eid the day before, but she was also angry and tearful. And I was ashamed, Madam Deputy Speaker, because I could not tell her our government was doing all it could in this situation. Now, the Minister said twice in his responses that delivering aid directly by sea and by air is inefficient. But surely efficiency is not the aim here, saving lives is. Surely inefficient aid is better than no aid. Will he look at this again with our international partners to see what aid we can deliver into these people?
My honourable friend talks with the painful authority of someone who has clearly taken a lot of time to get to know someone facing truly dreadful circumstances in Gaza, and I'm grateful to all those on my benches and beyond, Madam Deputy Speaker, who do that engagement and share it with me, and I recognise how heavily the responsibilities weigh on us, both as constituency MPs and, of course, for those of us in the government. It is not simply inefficiency that makes me repeatedly counsel this House not to focus on air and sea routes. We do keep them under regular review. We discuss them with our partners, particularly with our friends and allies in Jordan, who have conducted important airlifts of aid into the Gaza Strip. The reason I counsel the House in the way that I do is I I see so many of these cases. I am so conscious of the aggregate demands that, of course, if we can get aid safely into Gaza, consistent with humanitarian principles, then of course we will, and I reassure him and his constituent that we keep that under regular review. But I have to be honest with the House that it is road routes that will meet the scale and the manner that is required.
Dan Tomlinson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. May I thank the Minister for his work on so many important issues in the region and for taking the time to take questions, to answer questions so thoroughly from all sides of the House over the last 2 hours. I welcome the Minister's important announcement on sanctions today, which draws an essential distinction between the far-right extremist ministers and the people of Israel as a whole. We desperately need a ceasefire. We need more aid to get into Gaza to alleviate the horrendous human suffering, and we need the hostages still being held to be released. What further steps will the government take towards achieving all of those objectives?
I thank my honourable friend for his kind words, for his commitment to issues right across the region. He has been raising with me the concerns of his constituents in Chipping Barnet right since we were both first elected, and I'm sure he will continue to do so. I know that many in Chipping Barnet are focused not just on the horrors we have discussed in relation to aid provision, not just on the violence, but of course on the circumstances of those hostages. They remain very much in our mind. There was a British mother waiting for the safe return of her son, and we will not cease in our efforts to try and secure their release.
And the final question, Joe Powell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome these sanctions against Smotrich and Ben-Gvir and the coalition that was built to exert maximum pressure. It is really significant, as the government's sanctions have been in other contexts around the world on human rights, corruption and other issues. Next week's conference will be critical to, in the Minister's words, defend the vision and viability of two states living side by side in peace. So surely it is time to recognise the state of Palestine and agree a credible timeline with allies to bring it about. And can I ask the Minister to confirm that that is the government's objective?
I thank my honourable friend for his question. He has extensive experience of international coalition building and indeed of taking steps against those who support corruption or indeed, as in this case, breach human rights. I can confirm that we will be working with our friends and allies in order to try and preserve a path to a two-state solution at the conference next week in the way that he sets up.
That concludes the statement, and I thank both the Minister and, of course, members for their perseverance on this statement. We now move on to motion number 4 on criminal law. Minister to move.
I beg to move.
The question is, as on the order paper, as many as have that opinion say aye.
Aye.
Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes